Good evening, dear friends. We wish you a good week. This is the part 8 of the Divine Order and the Universe Online Reading Series.
There were some questions on the YouTube comments. If you like, we can start by replying some of these.
Yes, one of them is asked by Acha Erdem. Does the decision or the choice of a being made in an event belong to the being? Or do the influences that coming from its spirit become realized via the being? That is, does the being progress by the wishes and choices of the spirit?
All right. Now, before everything else, we must know that, when studying and advancing in such topics and divine matters, we must begin to think by gradually shedding off our habitual approach of thinking in human-centered terms. This is the first thing. Now, we make decisions upon our human wants and desires, yet there is no desire or wants in the spirit. There are needs, necessities in the spirit. To meet these needs, spirit doesn't send a request to human being like making a phone call, sending an email, etc. Rather, it is like a mirroring effect, as the example given in the book, or think it like a radio link. Via a mechanism that we will mention later, this is a kind of state of mingling with the being and with the body that being uses in the cosmos. The being is in application, we are that body. So, this is a state of engagement with that body. And whatever needs to happen in accordance with that necessity, that happens right away. Yet, this is not a wish or want of the spirit, dear friends, but its need. And consequently, our constitution of being, as the correspondent of the spirit in the material cosmos, and also as an essence which is capable of sending and receiving information to and from the material cosmos, it executes the organizations that will meet these needs. It has that capacity, after all. If there is a need in spirit, then there is that capacity in the being. Of course, it does not do all of these by itself. It is guided and helped by the guiding beings. Initially the organizations are executed by those beings, but later these organizations begin to be executed rather by the being. So, those needs are met. After all we live through is the need of spirit. What we live through is not for my needs but for my spirit. And the final statement of all those, as an essence, takes or finds a place in spirit. But how? We can't say that. For example, the concept of not telling lies, this does not take or find a place in spirit as this literal sentence. This can only be influential upon our material being. Lying is bad. This is only effective on our material, somatic existence and on the relation between our body and the being, but final statement of this belongs to spirit, and maybe, total of many lives of ours are for meeting a single need of spirit. After all those lives, 500 or 700 lifetimes we lived through during a cycle of 70,000 years is just a second for spirit. A second. A point. A moment. So, we understand that we must not assume that our daily problems, sorrows and sufferings takes a lot of places in our spirit. No, the final statements of all of those in spirit are much more different. Still, all the choices we made here are due to the need of spirit. Choosing, we had discussed this topic last week, and we can happily discuss it again this week because it is a very important subject. You are right about asking this. The choices we made in body may be too different than our needs in the level of being, but still, during the application they become parallel to each other. How? The being never loses its contact with spirit. After all, what keeps the being in the state of being is the need, the influences of spirit. So, the transformation, formations, deformations in the being, all those changes manifest from a higher level, yet the choices we make here manifest from our emotional level. Because of this, we mostly say, I wanted this or that with all my heart, but it didn't happen. Well, actually, we don't know how to want. We always want from the level of our emotions, from that imprisoned, entrapped level where our emotions slow down our vibrations. From this level we make choices. Later in the book we will see at the chapters about intention and praying, how important it is to keep our vibrations high and to make choices from that level. And this is possible by getting closer to our being, by wanting through getting closer to that part of our nature, and by allowing those influences of our wishes to elevate higher than our superconsciousness. And when that happens, our earthly desires, such as buying a Mercedes-Benz, suddenly begin to vanish. I am not saying that we should not buy a car, please don't misunderstand, but as we get rid of the unnecessary desires that shackles us, then it means we are closer to our being, and have begun wishing/wanting from that higher level, which are the most significant wishes for our spiritual development. How do we understand this? We may want and wish by turning inward, by increasing our moments of awareness, and by noticing in our daily lives the route directing us to our spiritual growth.
I have nothing to add to this, but I observe that we need to remind and repeat some basic things, because one of the questions is the number of spirits limited in all living beings or unlimited? Of course, in our audience there are newcomers who recently started to watch us, or didn't watch our previous videos, and of course, they try to understand what we discuss here. So, first of all, the divine order and the universe states that spirit and matter cannot be directly together, but only through indirect influences these two can communicate, transmit, and receive information and influences. And the book states that spirits are super-universe truths, and places them in a position way beyond our own cosmos. Now, in every sense of the word, we are within the matter universe. And starting from the first video, we read and explained how the first influence from spirit arrives at the amorphous matter of our universe, how the motion begins with the original influences coming from the original principle, how spirit plays its role in the manifestation of the first hydrogen atom and in the creation of hydrogen cosmos, of the elements. And we see that after the first hydrogen atom is manifested, which the book says that this is not the hydrogen atom you know. So first matter that was created of our matter cosmos, by receiving influences, advances, and later on by going through formations, deformations, transformations, it turns into more complex constitutions. And after an atom is created, a spirit connect to that atom. And we had stated that this bonding is through influences, indirect, not direct. We also had discussed that within the structure of matter, duality is needed. So, in this case, I think talking about or assigning some numbers to this is due to our narrow perspective and limited consciousness. If we say the number of spirits is 5 billion, what's the use? Manifestation of being, which will be clarified later, is expressed in the book as a influences and energies ensemble. And even each of our cells has a being. There are millions of brain cells and each of them has a being, and each being is connected to a spirit. So, wherever there is a manifestation due to influences and being, there is a spiritual influence. In this case, we may say there are infinite or unlimited influences of the spirits within the matter universe, but assigning some numbers to this, well, what's the benefit of knowing such numbers? So, I think it is much better to deal with the knowledge given. Should we begin reading? All right, we had stopped at page 25. So, the duality principle, which allows for the animation and occurrence of all matter, has been placed in the constitution of matter as the basic structure, as it is set in its components by the original principle. The original principle is a divine principle. So, in this way, duality expresses the situation of spirit, which is not within the universe, and of beings in our universe, that is, of matter, with each other within the matter constitution. So, a being, a body, thus understands that it is not a spirit itself but a reflection of spirit in the universe, and is a being that responds to the needs of a spirit through all its states and situations, and that it reflects the need that represents the spirit. Because of this, when the term being is used, the meaning intended in this regard is spirit. So, duality has been established to make this meaning possible. This passage nicely summarizes the things we said so far, doesn't it?
Yes. This first sentence caught my attention. So, the duality principle which allows for the animation and occurrence of all matter has been placed in the constitution of matter as the basic structure, as it is set in its components by the original principle. Duality principle, and later we will see the value differentiation. Duality principle and value differentiation are original aspects of our universe, its operation system. You may say, if this needs to be emphasized so much. Yes, it does. We need to tell that this is very important and there is no other way. When we look at how the neurons in our brains work, how the neurological system of our nerves creates a flux, or as the book later will explain, the balance of our body organism. What is balance? It is two-sided, isn't it? That's duality. The state of balancing. This is the characteristic of our universe, see? This state of being dual. But let's not make absurd assumptions like, then there can be universes with a three-state, etc. How can we know this? That's not important. Let's concentrate on this. Duality principle is the original law of our universe's way of operation, and it works by value differentiation. No need to understand all of these right away. Later, we will be talking about these in detail. And also, the original principle. This will be clarified properly on further pages. No need to haste. Duality is the operating rule established by the original principle, for our universe to work by. It's the first rule. The original rule. Although it seems very simple, it is the main principle of the creation of the whole universe. Up to where? To the unitary. Duality ends at the unitary and unity begins. We will talk about it later. But all things and happenings downward, down to the amorphous matter, down to the initial motion in the amorphous matter. As that initial motion is given, it is given by this duality principle. That initial motion is given by the duality principle and value differentiation. Here, the point is, it has been placed in the constitution of matter by the original principle, as the original rule as a way of operation. When this will become understandable for us? When in each point of our lives, we have an understanding of duality, as we often say, like the yin-yang, and at each change, at each action this principle works. Let's benefit from this knowledge. Later, we can begin to reach the conclusions. Do not think duality principle as electrical current. Think it in the occurrence of events. It is the rule. It exists in the electrical current, in the magnets, in polarity, yet these are the more basic example of this principle. At the higher levels, which we, as developed beings, need most to understand the flux of worldly affairs, this duality principle is our only helper in understanding the way it works in the events, happenings, and value differentiation allows it to work. Balance, disruption of balance and restoration of balance. Later we will discuss these topics in detail.
Again, here, the book emphasizes spirit, which is not within the universe, and the universe that is matter, that is completely different in quality. The book had mentioned the duality between spirit and matter. Spirit as active and matter as passive. Inert unless it receives an influence. This was stated at the beginning of the book. For the motion to occur, that kind of polarization was needed. As you said, the point here is to meet the need of spirit. And of course, by reflection the being represents spirit, but it is not the spirit itself. That is, reflection of something, as the often given example of mirror, is not necessarily that thing. Reflection is representative, an image of the thing. Still, the book says that when we say being we mean spirit in a sense. Consequently, the being serves in the evolution of spirit, meets its needs, and in the matter sense it advances its own development because in order to be able responding the influences from spirit, the being needs to become more complex. So, we, in this human form, we call this state of becoming more complex and developed as acquiring comprehension, And this comprehension is acquired in events, emotions, feelings which has duality, polarization. Even the scientists say that as we decide on something, our brains proceed in the simplest way on a basis of feeling good or bad. So, that polarization is with us within our living. If we feel that something is good, we attract to it. If it feels bad, we averse to doing it. Yet the more the comprehension or awareness increases, the more we glean knowledge or information from the events we live through. And we will read on further pages of the book about the mechanisms we convey the essence of this knowledge, gain to our spirit, such as contemplation, death, after death, the essence knowledge at the hereafter, the perceptual points of gatherings.
I'll make an addition. It looks we will proceed slowly on those paragraphs, but it's not important. Another point here I'd like to stress, so, a being, a body, thus understands that it is not a spirit itself but a reflection of spirit in the universe, and is a being that responds to the needs of a spirit through all its states and situations, and that it reflects the need that represents the spirit. All right, you nicely explained the second part of this sentence. Yet the first part of it is very interesting, a being, a body, thus understands that. Actually, before this book, the prevalent thinking was to consider the being a higher state that we try to get closer to. Yes, as we get developed, the being gets developed, but the being of a plant and the being of an animal are not on the same level, neither at the same level of understanding, of reality nor of awareness. And also, the being of a human who incarnated first time on earth and the being of a human after spending 70,000 years in various incarnations and now reading these sentences or watching this video on YouTube are not at the same level either. Because of this, the book says here, so, a being, a body, thus understands that it is not a spirit itself but a reflection of spirit in the universe. That is, that being begins to comprehend some things. Let's think, we humans, 60 or 70,000 years ago, in the initial stages of Stone Age, and only thing we are busy with is survival. And someone comes to us and say, come on, let go of your fears. Have some awareness. There is no place for fears in life, what would we do? Yes, you are laughing now, but the other one would beat the questioner with a stick, if it was invented. Because, the only problem of that Stone Age guy was survival. And I assume that guy understand the words, uses a language because there was also a period they were not in use. What I mean is, let's not think that while that man's understanding is so limited and narrow, his being is highly developed and waits that man to get closer to it. No. His being is only developed as much as to be that man's being. So, the being and the man gets developed in tandem, and the exchange of influences between these two also is reflected back to our spirit, and our spiritual side, as we mentioned, reaches some conclusions about the worldly affairs in a way we can't comprehend and express in words, and in this way, some of its needs are met, it gets experienced, it learns. So, it begins to leave the state of being a novice spirit. Remember that the book says, novice spirit. So, we cease to be a novice spirit, a novice being and move toward the stage of human. Yet at the stage of human, between a being at the beginning of this stage and a being at the end of this stage there are great differences. Another point I want to make, minutes ago, as we talk about the wants and wishes, there is an experiment done by Dean Radin, we use some videos of him in our conferences, this is what he found. At the double-slit experiment, they try to affect the point where the change happens between the particle form and the wave formed by meditation. They try to change the place the electron sent will land on the screen and they are successful up to some point. And by some further experiments they showed that this success is independent of distance. Yet, they can affect it only that much, they can't make all electrons align in a single line. People who don't know the double-slit experiment may not understand what I talk about, but if they search and read about it, they will easily understand. So, experimenters can't make the electrons land at the screen as single lines or make them more or less straight, only a small deviation. Yet even that slight deviation is impossible to achieve by chance, according to the probability calculus. So, it proved that an effect is made, a physical effect happened, but the interesting point here is human consciousness could make only that much. Yet more we are in tandem with our being, or the needs of our being/spirit are met, our concentration gives much more effective results, and consequently, in our intentions and prayers, we need to keep ourselves at such levels, to detect our real needs and focus our intentions on those needs. In this way, the great chasm between our bodily desires and our divine needs gradually begins to close. I mean, wants and wishes do not stay the same. We will be able to understand this gradually as we experience this difference, but we need to experience this. Yes, I wanted to add these.
All right. I continue. Life, throughout, is but the persistent observation of the duality principle, and its dependent mechanism of value differentiation. The more mankind's comprehension increases and expands in this regard, the better they penetrate the nuances of details concerning the matter and events that are subject to these principles. At first glance, it is possible to observe duality in rough states as well, because there is also duality in every matter form seen. The appearance of duality is obvious in the wholes and parts of this rough matter. For example, the activities of the human organism are executed through states of reciprocal equilibrium of two nervous systems, sympathetic and parasympathetic. These two nervous systems stand against each other in every organ of the body in opposite directions, such that, for example, in the heart, if the sympathetic system takes upon positive roles and the parasympathetic system takes upon negative roles, then in the stomach, where the sympathetic system takes upon negative roles, the parasympathetic system takes upon positive roles. That is, the states of stabilization of these two nervous systems, which are opposite to each other, execute main deeds in the continuation of the organism's activities, which constitute a whole. As one of these activates an organ and accelerates its duty, the other one which stands against it in an opposite character works to stop and to decelerate the same organ. So, by restraining the influences of the first system, it limits its speed, which can be detrimental, and thus protects the organism. Here, shifting the equilibrium of these two nervous systems this or that way is regulated and supervised by the being who governs that body, according to the necessities and requirements of life. We see the strongest manifestation of duality in the states of the sexes. A male and a female that came together constitute a duality unit. They are both opposites and supporters of each other. In this way, their reciprocal states and relations allow the progression and well-being of the family unit on all sides, and the complete disruption of the equilibrium between these two opposites means the disintegration of the family. There is duality in feelings, as well, sympathy, antipathy, love, hate, friendship, enmity, selfishness, altruism, etc. Similarly, there is also a duality in concepts, goodness, bad, beauty, ugliness, etc. In short, it is possible to see and find duality in all crude states. However, it is also essential to see duality in more complex states. If the duality principle is not supported by the value differentiation mechanism and stands alone, it will be useless and depreciated. The duality principle and value differentiation mechanism are two mechanisms attuned to each other for the realization of a certain function and can engage in action through each other's existence. More correctly, value differentiation is the additional mechanism of the duality principle.
As to the last sentence, one of these is a principle and the other is a mechanism. As Mr. Ruhselman compiled these spiritual communiqués, he was very careful. One is the principle, the other is the mechanism. I mean, the main one, the essential one, is the duality principle. After all, It is the duality principle that has been placed in the constitution of matter by the original principle, but it is the value differentiation mechanism operating it. In this last sentence, this becomes explicit. This passage, at the start, talks about balance and how it exists in our bodies, in concepts, in events, etc. For example, there is a type of illness the book mentions often, cancer. Indeed, also cancer is about the duality principle and value differentiation, about the disruption of balance and bodies working only one-sided and resulting systems losing its balance. Well, all disease and illness are such, but because cancer generally leads to a physical growth, it is visible, observable, so easy for us to understand. Why? For example, when I first heard about that it was not due to a microbe or virus but due to disruption of balance of body, I was very surprised. In simple terms, a part of the body tries to grow and the other part tries to contain it, and if the growing part gets stronger and the containing part gets weaker, growths take over the body. And there is another illness which is quite opposite. Growing part remains weak but the containing part begins to see everything else as enemy, and if the containing part gets stronger, illness begins. So, when these two sides are in balance, then we have healthy bodies. So, our purpose is, like it is in everything else, to keep this balance within the body. Another example I can give, in the communication system of our neurons, as they spread all neurological influences to all over our bodies, there are 4 ions in action: salt, Na, calcium, Ca, chlorine, Ci, and potassium, K. These 4 ions pass through cell wall by a reception system, and this process creates electric current. I oversimplify this, of course. When there is no incoming influence, or even as we sleep, all those cells have average membrane potential, which is 70 millivolts or 0.07 volts. Whenever an influence arrives at the cell, over a certain barrier, these ions move, and as they affect each other, electric current begins. See, the same system begins working. Value differentiation occurs and flux happens. Until when? Until the influence ceases. When it ceases, the balance is restored and becomes stable. And in biology, the cell in this state is called stable cell. Stable state of neuron. So we can clearly see the states of balance, of disruption and restoring of balance in such examples. I had noted these down to give you as examples.
Indeed, the examples given in the book are so clear. Because Mr. Ruhselman is a medical doctor, it seems so natural that these examples are given to explain the content of the spiritual communique given during the séance. Well, this expression is my favorite, a duality unit. That is, a woman and a man make a family. Family is a duality unit. Just like a magnet. When you look at it, you see a hole with opposing poles, positive and negative. It makes a duality unit. That is, everything we see in the matter system as wholes can only exist with its opposite side. So, it's all about allowing motion and establishing the value differentiation as a mechanism, as an assisting mechanism to the duality principle is very important. It means that to whichever side we lean to, be it vibration or quantity or physical, even an emotion, we shift the value to that side. As the book's example, selfishness, altruism, if the shift is toward selfishness, the balance is disrupted toward that side. Then we encounter the consequences of that side, as the shifted value takes us to that side. If we go for positive values toward altruism by some conscientious choices or manifestations in life, the experience we acquired begin to shift to that side. Then we begin to attract events and experiences akin to that side. In that sense, the value differentiation shows where we tend to shift, which side we put weight in our experiences, accumulations, conscientious actions, etc. Later we will read, yes. The being advances with selfishness as well, but due to the cause and effect mechanism. In this duality system of ours, we reap what we sow. So, increasing consciousness or awareness is important in increasing the value intentionally or consciously. This is how I think, How does the knowledge or information I read or learn will be useful right now in my life? Where does it take me? It is easy to use this knowledge of duality both in our daily lives and in topics of spirit and matter. It points us the direction to put our weight for our spiritual development.
Yes, and I would like to add something. I had mentioned this last week. We now read these sentences in the book and at the same time we try to make them useful, practical in our daily lives. We don't give you synonyms of the words we read and tell you that now it is understandable. Because of this, to benefit from the book in our daily lives, let's try to understand this, let's say, goodness and bad, or selfishness altruism. That's a big predicament for people like us. The law of sympathy is very important. But no mistake, it is not law of attraction, that was introduced to our jargon with a book. Yet sympathization is something entirely different. Let's think, we have a certain reality and have some deficiencies we want to meet, our spirit has some needs to be met, therefore our being has some needs and therefore our body spends some effort to meet these needs. So, when we take sympathy and antipathy as an example, our example is selfishness and altruism. If we have deficiencies related to altruism, maybe we assume that we are altruistic but in fact we are not at all, yet also being altruistic in everything is a deficiency, which is a big mistake. So, if we have such problems, all events we face or encounter will be of the kind that push our buttons related to our deficiencies about altruism. Events like a hammer to a nail. Or we are selfish but denying this, still no problem, but if we lean to being selfish due to sympathization, in thinking then all things happen to us will be about selfishness. And due to law of sympathization, again we see the workings of duality principle, events come to us two-sided, together with selfishness and altruism but depending on our way of thinking, our concerns and desires which make us lean to one side, events assume a quality relating to that side. And this tells us that incoming influence or the event is our mirror, whichever side we are deficient at, we face it. You know, we simply say, well, that was telling something to me, but still justify our behavior. It's a classic. But how many times that thing happened to us? We must think about it. We never look at events in this way. We just talk. If the same thing happened to us more than once, 2, 3, 4 times, then it is time to take it to our inner lab, dissect and examine. So, here the duality principle, sympathization, disruption of balance, values differing, we need to understand all of these together in an event. Really, despite I had mentioned it last week, I wanted to repeat this here, once more.
So, you say we attract events. When same kind of events happen to me, repeatedly, even by increasing intensity, there is something there I need to notice, or a real need of my being. Because I didn't meet that need, beings with duty by their influences allow me to encounter this kind of event repeatedly. If I can't glean its information, then that event happens to me in a bigger way. This is so in daily life, in our relationships, health problems. So, we attract the events in life in accordance with our needs. Well, as I say we attract, actually I mean that we summon that event to meet that need.
Yes, but I also want to add, that event happens to us a whole so we have a right to choose within it. If we can wake up within those kinds of events, whichever our problem is, if we make the right choice we get out of that vicious spiral. Event has duality, with two polarities. If we make the right choice then we engage with the right part of that event. And then, the event does not repeat. We are always face to face with choices and we choose one of these. The point is to make the right choice at these divisions. Especially at those highly charged moments of anger, irritation, sadness, jealousy, concern, we must detect or catch what we are doing wrong at those moments. I mean, we can detect it there. Because two choices are coming together and we have the right to detect the right one and the right to understand why such events happen to us. This right is a given to us. Always, we are given two choices. You know, it is written in all religious texts. Even Adam and Eve are given the choice of picking or not picking the fruit from the tree of knowledge. Pick it or not. I want you not to pick it. What am I saying? Don't eat. Don't choose it. I tell you that choice is wrong, says God, but leaves it up to Adam and Eve. So, it is also up to us. In all events and moments of choosing, we are in that state when Adam or Eve chose eating the fruit. In a way, we are always dealing with the fruit of that tree. Eventually, human learns. Sometimes we choose going to the bottom. And sometimes, because we found the right option, we continue living at a higher level by attracting higher/finer influences. Due to sympathization. But always we have the right to choose. I am sure right now someone is writing on the chat window to ask, well, who chooses? Being or body or spirit? Dear friends, the closer we are with our being, the more advanced we are in our spiritual growth, and the more we spent effort in our development, then the more our body and being make choices in tandem. Otherwise, as I mentioned at the start of this video, the body makes choices only related to its concerns, that is, only for survival. Of course, the being is still in the play, but the bodily concerns take the upper hand. The more we turn inward, just as in meditative states, the more we turn to our being. In those meditative, contemplating states it gets easier to make such choices. So, when we need to make important decisions about our lives, let's not make decisions while visiting a fun park and eating cotton candy. In a silent room or in nature, by ourselves, closing our eyes and turning inward and listening to our inner voice, if we practiced it enough, that's the proper way of making important decisions about our lives. We may not make a decision right away, no problem, but let's express our wish that events in near future may point us the right direction in making our decisions. That's it. Soon, in the following days you will see that events will give you answers to your question. Indeed, this is a very practical method. It doesn't belong to me or someone else. Use this method if you ask how you can understand the language of events, how you can choose the right option. By becoming your own manager, you can choose or decide. Well, I think I talked too long, but all right.
It's all right. Then, let's read on. Let us complete our explanation on value differentiation. First, we should explain what the value is. We have seen that matter states exist only through certain motions. In this case, the state of matter in a given stage means manifestation of the sum of motion complexes that exist in that matter at that moment. And this is a concept which makes that matter exist and which gives an identity to it particular to that moment. So in any given moment, the motion complexes of matter that resulted in the presence in a milieu it is in are a sum of values or of quantities for that being. Therefore, decreasing or increasing of the content of motion in a matter's constitution in this or that way means the differentiation of that matter's values, that is, the decreasing or increasing of these values. And this occurs through incoming external influences on one or other of the opposites of that matter unit. 4. Influence is a motion as well. So, this is the meaning we express by value differentiation or quantitative transitions. In summary, more incoming influences at one or other of the motion complexes, which are opposites in kind to each other, that is, at one of two opposite values of a duality unit, requires the value differentiation of that unity or unit. Therefore, incoming influences each have their own values. So, one of the opposites receiving more value than the other results in a disruption in the equilibrium that exists between these opposites. However, in accordance with the duality principle, these opposites must remain in a continuous state of equilibrium. So, in order for this disrupted equilibrium to be restored, a flux occurs from the more valued part to the less valued part, and the expression of this fluxing state of matter is motion. Through these motions that will occur in various directions, myriad transitions and recreations upon the states and forms of matter transpire. Well, I think this is so clear. We gave many examples. In daily events, in types of motions, in polarities. And here, what value differentiation means quantitatively, be it in emotions or in choices we made in life, or in complex structures of matter, this is valid for all. Here, the book gives a very fundamental knowledge.
Yes. Here, it is very clear, but the part that got my attention is, for, influence is a motion as well. Well, prior to this book is disclosed and published, influence as a word was lofty for us, and we had a thinking like it should be out of, beyond the matter universe. Well, it was understandable. However, this book, starting from its introduction to its last sentence, focuses only on matter universe. Our work, as the spiritual being, that is spirit, its being and body of its being, our work is matter universe, after all. That's why the book says, look, matter universe is your thing. Learn matter. Learn matter and spirit and original principle. Learn their relation. And later, as we studied the passages about formations, deformations and transformations of matter, we began to understand that influence is not a lofty, invisible, unknowable system only known by a certain level of beings, only known by the unitary. Influence is a variation of matter, its interaction. Of course, depending on the intended action, there are many types of influences. Later we will discuss these four main types of influences. Yet, even these four types can't work independent of a principle because there is no need for it. What was our principle? Everything in the matter universe is of matter. We can't find anything else in the matter universe. Everything is the variations of matter. Consequently, influence is the interaction of matter. At what values? At which motions? We don't know. But everything in the matter universe is of matter. Once we read, influence is a motion, we understand that this is at least a state of matter that ceased to be amorphous matter. Of course, with much higher influences, it assumes myriad manifestations that we can't know, but still, they are the variations of matter. Or with much lower influences, as we just mentioned, it assumes chemical manifestations like the ones used in keeping the body in balance. Like these, it may assume many different manifestations, appearances, but these are still motion, types of motions of matter. As stated at the end of this passage, so, in order for this disrupted equilibrium to be restored, a flux occurs from the more valued part to the less valued part, and the expression of this fluxing state of matter is motion. So, the book links the motion to the topic. For, influence is a motion, as well. This flux, what it was mentioned previously about neurons is also an influence, we had mentioned how influence flows through our nervous system. It is also an influence, of course, an electrochemical influence but influence still. However, the influence that allows a hydrogen atom's transformation to a helium atom is an influence still but a different type of influence, an original one. We will discuss it later. Its method is much more different. Yes, there are many different influences, but please notice that in its manifestation, material milieus and material data are used. For me, this sentence, influence is motion, is very important.
On further passages, we will read about the influences coming from supra-universe truths, from spirits and the secondary influences after the arrival of these initial original influences at our matter universe. We will discuss the types of influences in detail on further pages. But the phrases that caught our attention here, influence is motion and is in a state of flux. And a flux always occurs between opposites. Where more value is shifted to one side, equilibrium disrupts, and to restore the equilibrium, from the side with higher value to the side with lower value, a flux occurs. So, the book explains the whole mechanism. In the duality of spirit and universe, it must never be forgotten that the responding of the universe parts with complete harmony towards the behaviors of spirits that occur in accordance with their evolutionary needs is realized. only by the necessities of the original principle. This principle reflects these behaviors of spirits upon matter substance and returns the reactions of every matter parts and whole by reflecting these back to spirits. That is, the needs of spirits are reflected to the universe as influences in accordance with the necessities of sublime principles. Because responding immediately to the needs which are reflected to the universe, that is, acting upon the necessities this influence carries, is the characteristic imperative of matter substance. The response that matter gives through this imperative is again reflected back through the same channels with the same necessities to spirits. Here, this knowledge states one more time what the concept of necessity is and how vast and profound is the meaning it carries. In our universe, in universes and amidst spirits which are above the universes, necessity encompasses everything. Necessity is the expression of situations that are stated and determined in the original principle. Profound. Necessity is the expression of situations that are stated and determined in the original principle. So, beyond our universe, beyond the universes and spirits that are supra-universe, there is a system that states and determines all those systems.
Yes. It talks about the original principle. The principle. So, what is necessity? If we make it simpler, we shouldn't do this always, but now, to make it established in our minds, we can say, meant to be. Who knows what a thing is meant to be? Related to the evolution of, development of spirits, what is meant to be, what is necessity? When it entered the matter universe, it is meant to manifest as influence. Why? We just mentioned that influence is a motion. It assumes motion, a material interaction that we call influence. This occurs under the supervision and with the knowledge of the unitary, and after being filtered and transforming into variations it reaches to the down, to wherever it is meant to reach. And whatever is meant to be at the level of the original principle, those influences allow it to manifest. However, this doesn't mean that the choosing is done by the original principle. Actually, rather those are meant to prepare the setting, the milieu for human beings with a certain degree of development and other more developed beings. The rest under that level are almost completely automatic. The necessities set by the original principle make the right to choose for them unnecessary. System advances accordingly. However, for the human that has the right to choose, influences begin to manifest as events compelling human to choose. And again, whatever is meant to be does happen. This is what we call necessity. This is what I could think of, right now. And what this paragraph explains is very clear, that's why I can't think of more to add.
So, divine principle organizes and determines whatever is needed to meet the needs of spirits within a given universe by influences, by motions. And the character of matter substance is meant to respond those influences, as well. And in this way, immense orders are established in the universe. I mean, human mind can't imagine this, but for me, reading this is exhilarating. How does it feel for you?
I try to understand.
Yes, we try to understand, but that influence, how everything is in a magnificent order. As the book says, in our universe, in universes and amidst spirits which are above the universes. Then it means that other universes are also stated and determined by the original principle, and they have to comply their necessities. We had read an example of a projector. It was stated that like the different colored glasses put before the projector, universes were not mixing with or have connections to each other. I notice such questions our friends write, like are we also present in other universes? We don't know how spirits evolve or advance in other universes, with which kind of necessities, in what kind of relation with the substances of other universes. As what is stated here, if there are infinite universes, and if the evolutionary needs of spirits are also infinite, we can only know about the relation within our own universe, not about the other universes. But what is obvious here, be it in our universe or in others. Spirits are subject to the necessities set and determined by the original principle. Of course, we easily talk about these topics, but what we talk about is actually immense, profound.
It gives us responsibility. Maybe here we might be thinking automatically like this: spirit has a need and it governs its being in accordance with its need, and to do this, it sends influence. Yet here, the book says that this is not the way. Spirit doesn't have such a capacity to send influences because it doesn't have the capacity to mingle or engage with matter in this way. This is original principle's doing. Just like we previously read, it is like reflected from a mirror. That is, there is the principle itself and there is its reflection. If you remember from science class in school, the image on the mirror is calculated. Let's say it is like reflected from the original principle mirror, from that wise mirror, that high-level mirror, from that mirror that states and determines the necessities. It is reflected to the matter universe in the form of necessities, and upon entering the matter universe, it spreads as influences, and at all points that has a sympathy with it, motions find each other and create value differentiation in accordance with the duality principle. The equilibrium gets disrupted in compliance with the necessities, with what is meant to be. And human beings, more correctly, spiritual beings, including all plants, animals and humans, and of course the beings with duty, make choices and exchange influences that has transformed into further variations in the matter universe, and send the feedback of all those interactions. Again, consider it like a reflection, via the original principle. We can visualize this process in our meditations, but of course without trying to imagine original principle, it is in vain. But let's try to visualize how they work in this way, in our mind's eye. And let's try to understand that this exchange goes on infinitely. So it means that out of the knowledge of the original principle, if we can name it knowledge, nothing happens. We can reach this conclusion as well because all spiritual needs are reflected from it.
Yes. Let's read the next passage. It will summarize nicely what we have discussed today. Each word we utter, each statement we use, each example we give, is but the material facilities of our universe, and none of these can have an authentic presence amidst the sublime values which are above the universe. So, no matter how much we talk here, our words and examples will not be able to explain it, can't encompass it. We only try sensing it, intuiting it. Nevertheless, these are sufficient to put forth the materialized expressions of the truths within the universe as symbols and, by this, to give some intuitions. After all, there is no earthly being who can grasp it further than this. After stating this point, we return again to the mirror symbol. We have said that by the necessities of sublime principles, the needs of spirits are reflected, as if from a mirror, to the universe, and the response coming from there is reflected back to spirits. We wish to strengthen the intuition of this enormous truth, which we have to put into a world example. By reconciling the mirror symbol here with world, time, and space, by thinking of the spirits on one side, and the mirror against them, and the universe on the other side. Considerations should not be carried out by trying to measure the reflections for certain periods of time, in accordance with the distances between these. For, in the truths which are above the universe, there are no states of time and space particular to our world. Nevertheless, by remaining devoid of time and space restrictions, it is necessary to accept the concepts of mirror spirit universe as if they are within each other, and to look at the process which is intended by this symbol as if it occurs and ends at the same time, without assigning it a time period in the sense that mankind understands it. We vehemently wish to remind you that, as explained in the mirror example, the moment mankind fails to properly gain intuitions that are free from their accustomed time and space constraint, it is always possible for them to face the danger awaiting them. And this danger is a misconception. That is, This intuition of spirit mirror universe symbol we stated should never ever lead one to a concept of pantheism, because the ones who understand well what is written know that such a concept has not been intended. The thought of sublime principles, spirits and universes merging into a single being leads mankind in a direction which is the exact opposite of the truths we wish to talk about, and sweeps away all of their higher intuitions.
Yes. Here, the book goes into detail and also, towards the end, gives another concept. Pantheism. Saying this can be misunderstood. At the beginning, this example, we must take it without exaggeration. That's why we say examples must be sensed, intuited. As you said. Without giving it a solid shape. I mean, one is facing other, next to it, above it, below it, all of these are born out of our superficial time perception, our earthly understanding. Let alone the state of the original principle, even in the realm of duty, in that subtle realm there is such understanding. Even in there, we grow out of it. Yet due to the restrictions of our bodies, we can only intuit these by symbols. Religions also use symbols to evoke in us such intuitions in our fields of consciousness. Let's not make these into solid shapes. Of course, it is better to think on them as we turn inwards, in contemplation. That's why, we need to read this book by our intuitions. We can't read this like a physics textbook or a religious book. This book has a different method to be read. Let's be confident and read it with our inner eyes and mind. When we do this, I think it will be easier to understand it. Before I give the mic to you, let me say this: pantheism. Our spirit's gradual ascension or taking place a higher stage, such things are out of question. Gradualness is actually a characteristic of our matter universe. So, being at the lower or higher stage is indeed the characteristics of our matter universe. Thus, we can't assign this to spirit or original principle. And after all, because spirit can't directly engage with the matter universe, considering spirit as one with universe is nonsense. As we read on, we will understand better that the aim is not oneness, after all. There is only one reason: evolution of spirits. In case we get stuck and confused about all of these, let's remember this: evolution of spirits. This is the only reason. Evolution of spirits. That's all I can say for now.
Of course, here, the plan is speaking from a higher level and trying to give examples suitable for our understanding. They try to make us sensing a truth. They even say, we have to put into a world example. In order to explain it to us, the plan gives an example, tries to give an intuition. They try to give us an immense truth in manageable bits, drop, by adjusting it to the space and time of our world. Our tendency is to classify things, to squeeze into a mold, to put things into positions. Yet the book says to attain this truth you have to put worldly space-time concepts aside. Because of this, as you said, below and above, near and distant, etc., the book says if you get too much caught in these, then you will have misconceptions. This is clearly expressed here. Anyway, on further pages we will read that in our matter universe, within that infinite process of development, the highest point we can attain is the unitary. Even when we attain this point, it will not be like pantheism suggested, such as attaining oneness with spirits. On the contrary, the plan says that when the service to spirit is finished, matter reverts to the amorphous state.
Well, like I did, I am sure everyone that read those lines felt all mixed up. I said, oh, boy. For us, humans that barely began to understand a few things, this state of nothingness is troublesome. Not because that we read these. For people all over the world, this state of nothingness is troublesome. Yet this is not a state of nothingness. It is reverting to its original state. Because we think ourselves as bodies, solely as bodies, such a concept troubles us.
and we think our being is this body of ours. And because we assume our being is just this body, this limited, this narrow body with its feeble perception and 5 senses, we try too hard to integrate this limited state of ours to a higher order. Well, we can't help it. This is due to the deception of this world system.
It is so normal.
Normal. Just like it is said, each particle that's separated from the source longs to be united. So, this initial motion that began with the original influence coming from the original principle, which is outside of our universe. So, we are always in motion towards that source. Yet this does not mean that we came from that original principle and we will go back to the original principle. This is not the case. We need to understand this very well. By the influence coming from the original principle, matter that is at the lowest state gets developed through a process to higher states. Yes, the source is the original principle, but this does not mean we came from there and will go back there. We are created in matter, starting from the amorphous state and going through subhydrogen, first hydrogen atom, elements, etc. We advance by going through many stages as beings. As the beings get developed in managing their influence, and as our beings in that perceptual point of gatherings gets developed, they become more able to manage our bodies. Yes, understanding all of these is a little bit hard, but we try to understand together.
Yes. And also, it may be useful to point this, the book says pantheism doesn't exist. It doesn't. Do not ever assume that spirit and the matter universe and the original principle will become one. This is not about ascension. We must use the concepts properly. Oneness and unity are different. For example, in the plan of duty, the state of unity, like many voices saying the same thing, intensifies by the increasing of comprehensions, and at the utmost point of unitary, it is a state of final unity, but it is not a unity with the spirit. Even at that state, spirit is still outside of the matter universe. That final and utmost point is a state belongs to matter universe, but a state of unity where the duality ceases. So, that state of unity is not the same state pantheism suggests. Let's not mistake this with other. This is very important. That is, we don't go back to the Creator. There are some statements like, I am God, that been mistakenly expressed due to religious fervor. Or just like Mr. Eric Dull said, due to seeing or experiencing the brightness of one's own being but assuming that is of God. However, that state of the unitary, well, it is impossible for us to sense in a meditative state etc. and then to declare that, I am enlightened. It is not that easy, well, it is out of question. Otherwise, it would be impossible to remain in the matter state, in the body. Enlightenment is only a state of sensing the higher influences of one's own being, nothing else. Neither the state of oneness nor the state of unity. It is only a state of experiencing the brightness, higher influences of one's own being.
Yes, time flew again, and we are now at the last paragraph of page 29. We hope this video was helpful for you. As we read and discuss here, we also try hard to understand. A friend wrote that according to the book, unitary is the last stop for us. There is nothing beyond that. If we say it like this, it may feel that we are near to it, but actually we talk about an infinite process.
Actually, the unitary is the real aim of spirit. What we mean with evolution is to be the universe, and the unitary is the universe itself. Please notice that I don't say space. The very universe itself. Then, we become the universe. When it is said in the Quran, we are closer to him than his jugular vein, this was meant. The more we become the universe, the phrase of widening of comprehension is about this. As our comprehension widens, we become extending towards the universe. As we expand our comprehension, we get closer to the unitary. Of course, we can't measure the remaining distance in kilometers. The gap will narrow as much as we evolve. And the more we evolve, the faster the process. This is the silver lining. Previous stages before the human stage were too slow. Now the process begins to accelerate and to use different realities using the duality principle.
Yes. We wish you all a wonderful week until we see each other next week. Next week, the topics are heavier.
Yes, this will go on like this for a while, from a higher level. We try to do our best as much as we can, but we try to understand and explain a topic beyond human stage by human words, symbols and intuitions. Have a good week.